The night Harvey walked away from me, I realized two terrifying truths. First, I had loved a man who had only ever loved what I could give him. Second, I had nothing left but the broken pieces of myself and the fire in my chest refusing to die. I never planned on marrying for advantage, and surely not a man who stood under a chandelier like he owned the air it shimmered on. But that was Harvey Quinn, the rising son of one of the city's oldest political families. And I was Nash Carter, a nobody with a past battered by debt, a sick father, and a family farm barely standing on hope and a good prayer. Our marriage was a deal sealed over polished glass and cold signatures, a merger of survival and ambition. He got the optics of courage and progress, a young, queer public figure unafraid to show love. I got financial help from my father, a lifeline I was too desperate to refuse. But no one warned me of the hollow echo inside a marriage built on everything except love. The story should have ended the night he whispered that he was leaving, his voice cool and practiced, as if he were announcing a new campaign slogan. But that night was only the beginning. Because when a man loses everything, he learns exactly who he is. And when he rises again, he becomes someone impossible to ignore. That was the man I would become. And that was the man Harvey would one day come crawling back to. I first saw Harvey across a long white conference table in his father's downtown office. He looked like the kind of person magazines tried to capture, but never fully could, charismatic in a way that felt manufactured, yet undeniably captivating. His suit was tailored with almost arrogant precision, shoulders straight, smile sharp, eyes quick. He didn't glance at me long, but when he did, it was enough to feel like sunlight was hitting a spot no warmth could reach. He looked at me as if he already knew every sacrifice I would make for him. And I guess, in a way, he did. The marriage proposal wasn't romantic. It wasn't even private. It was an offer delivered like a contract, because that's exactly what it was. His father sat across from us, speaking of polling numbers and image boosts, while I sat quietly, thinking of the medical bills piling up back home. Harvey never objected, never questioned, never asked me what I wanted. He simply leaned back in his chair, crossed one leg over the other, and said in a smooth, unbothered tone, "This is mutually beneficial. You need stability. I need a partner the public will rally behind. We help each other." I was young, too young, and tired, too tired to notice that help was the last thing he was offering. I agreed. I signed. And for a while, I tried to believe it could be enough. Our wedding was a spectacle of glass lights, cameras, perfectly crafted smiles, and families pretending to approve what they didn't understand. I stood beside him in a suit that didn't feel like mine, surrounded by people who applauded not because they were happy, but because they knew this union was valuable. Harvey held my hand for the cameras. His grip was warm but practiced. His lips brushed my cheek during pictures with a kind of affection that looked real but tasted like strategy. To the world, we were a stunning, groundbreaking couple, two men daring to rewrite tradition. But behind the gold-trimmed doors, we were strangers. Sometimes I think he never looked at me long enough to truly see me. Sometimes I think I never let him. At first, I tried to make it work. I cooked dinners he rarely ate. I waited for him on nights he never came home. I listened to speeches he practiced in the mirror, telling him which lines felt honest and which felt hollow. I sat beside him during political galas, smiling when he placed his hand on my back, playing the role expected of me. He thanked me sometimes, usually with the same tone he used when thanking donors. Appreciative but detached. Other times, he barely acknowledged I was there. But then there were nights when he'd come home late, exhausted, the weight of the world sitting heavy on his shoulders. He'd sit beside me, close enough for me to feel the heat of his skin, and look at me with something raw, something almost real. Those nights made me believe there was something deeper, something fragile but worth protecting. I told myself that people like Harvey didn't know how to love easily. I told myself that if I stayed, if I tried, if I showed him enough grace, eventually he'd love me back. I was wrong. So painfully wrong. The night he left, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was cold, surgical. The way people end a conversation they never wanted to start. We were standing in the kitchen. I was cutting vegetables for a dinner he wasn't going to eat again. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, jaw tightening. Then he put the phone down and said it. Nash, I can't do this anymore. I thought he was talking about the dinner. I actually laughed. But then he inhaled slow, steady, rehearsed. I'm ending this. The marriage. All of it. I froze. He didn't. He kept going, his voice flat, emotionless. The arrangement has run its course. It's not beneficial anymore. Beneficial. As if I were a tax deduction. I asked him why. I asked him if he meant anything he ever said on those rare nights when his walls fell. He looked away, like my pain was inconvenient. Nash, you knew what this was from the beginning. And with that one sentence, he crushed every fragile hope I had ever dared to hold. He moved his things out the next morning. Just like that. As if our entire life together had been nothing but staged photographs for a world that would soon forget us. I spent weeks after that numb, drifting through an empty apartment filled with memories that didn't belong to me anymore. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, could barely breathe. Everything I had built my fragile life upon had collapsed. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It is the strongest foundation a man can rebuild himself on. And I rebuilt. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted myself back. I started small, a job at a gym, early mornings training clients who had no idea I used to stand under gold chandeliers beside a man who kissed me for cameras. Then I took a course in sports science, then another. I ran every morning, pushing myself until sweat became the only proof I was still alive. Pain became purpose. Purpose became momentum. Momentum became transformation. 6 months later, I wasn't the same man he abandoned. I was stronger, sharper, more confident. People noticed. Clients doubled, then tripled. Local fitness brands reached out. I posted a video online one night talking about rebuilding after heartbreak. It went viral. Suddenly, I wasn't just Nash from nowhere. I was Nash Carter, the man who clawed his way back from the ashes. And that was when Harvey saw me again. Not in person. Online. On a screen where I was finally the one shining. He texted me 2 simple words. We should talk. But what he didn't realize was that the man he left behind no longer existed. And the man standing in his place wasn't waiting for him anymore. I didn't reply immediately. His text sat there blinking on my phone, a small, pulsing reminder of a past I had buried under sweat, hard work, and quiet victories. For a long time, I'd imagined that moment. I'd imagined seeing him again, and I would crumble, my old self rushing to meet him. But now, staring at those words, I realized I didn't need to respond. Not yet. Not while I was still learning what it meant to be me without him. Weeks passed. My life became a symphony of routines, goals, and new people who genuinely cared for who I was, not for the image I once projected. I had friends in the gym who cheered for me when I hit personal records, strangers who sent messages thanking me for my videos, and even a few young men who looked at me like I might be a mentor, a guide, someone who had survived and could teach resilience. And Harvey, he lingered like a ghost, watching, waiting, unaware that the Nash he left behind had become someone entirely unrecognizable. One Friday evening, I was wrapping up a personal training session when my assistant, Mia, ran in waving her phone. Nash, you might want to see this. I wiped sweat from my brow, expecting another viral comment or a spam message, but it wasn't. It was Harvey, again. This time, he had tagged me in a public post on one of those news profiles that followed socialites and ambitious young men in politics. Congratulations, it read. I've been watching your growth. Impressive. I stared at the screen, incredulous. My first reaction was anger, a flash of old resentment that burned in my chest. He was praising me now, after leaving me to rebuild from nothing? The audacity. But beneath the anger, something else stirred. A familiar, unwelcome ache. A memory of him, sitting across the kitchen table, indifferent, calling me beneficial, like I was a business asset. The memory stung, but it didn't break me. Not anymore. Instead, I smiled, slowly, deliberately, savoring the victory that wasn't just in words, but in my life itself. I replied publicly. Thanks. I've been busy building the life I want, not the one someone else imagined for me. It was a subtle reminder. Not cruel, just firm. I didn't need to throw him down. I needed him to realize the gap between who I was and who I had become. The next weeks were a blur of success, social events, and media appearances. My face was in magazines, my videos were shared across platforms, and every time I walked into a room, people noticed. I noticed the way their eyes lingered, how they whispered, and I allowed myself a quiet, private thrill at the attention that once belonged to someone else. Then, one evening, I saw him in person for the first time in almost a year. It was at a charity gala for LGBTQ youth. The room sparkled with chandeliers and laughter, much like the wedding hall where Harvey and I had once stood together, pretending to be something we were not. I was on the stage accepting an award for community impact when I felt him before I saw him. That same magnetic pull, the kind that had once been intoxicating and destructive in equal measure. I turned slightly, and there he was, Harvey Quinn, leaning casually against a marble column, dressed in a crisp black suit, eyes scanning the crowd until they found me. Time slowed. For a moment, I saw the man I had loved, the man I had begged to stay, the man who had walked away like my existence was irrelevant. And then, I saw the man I had become, confident, radiant, unbroken, and utterly unafraid of him. He smiled, just slightly, but it was enough. Enough to know that he recognized the change. Enough to make my pulse spike, though I wouldn't admit it. After my speech, the crowd dissipated, and Harvey approached. Every step he took felt rehearsed, cautious, as if he wasn't sure I'd even acknowledge him. Nash, he said softly, almost reverently. I turned, maintaining that calm composure that had taken me months to cultivate. Harvey, I said simply. We walked into a quieter corner of the gala hall, the kind where chandeliers still sparkled, but no one could see the tension between us. He leaned against a wall, hands in his pockets, eyes tracing my jawline as if memorizing me again. I wanted to see you, he admitted. I've been watching. You've changed. I laughed softly, a sound free of bitterness. Changed? Or finally remembered who I was. His eyes flickered, an emotion I couldn't name crossing them. Regret? Desire? Something more dangerous. No. I cut him off gently but firmly. Don't. I'm not the Nash you left behind. I'm not waiting for you to decide if you want me. That chapter ended a long time ago. He winced, and I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But I didn't. He had made his choices. I had made mine. Over the next few weeks, he tried. He called. He sent messages, invitations, even gifts, small, luxurious things that he thought might sway me. But every time, I paused, thought, and sent a simple reply. I'm busy building a life that isn't contingent on anyone else's whims. Every rejection fueled him. It frustrated him. He couldn't understand that I no longer needed his approval, his love, or his presence to feel whole. One evening, he showed up unannounced at the gym where I trained. I was finishing a late session, my muscles burning, sweat dripping, when I saw him leaning against the doorframe, suit slightly rumpled, eyes desperate. Nash, please, he said. I need to talk. I toweled off slowly, letting him see the physical confidence I now carried. Harvey, I said, voice calm, measured, I've got clients waiting. You don't need to be here. He swallowed, frustration flickering across his features. I've made a mistake. Leaving us, it was a mistake. You're everything I didn't see I needed. I love you, Nash. And I can't lose you. For a moment, I felt the old ache in my chest, the part that still remembered his warmth. But then I saw myself reflected in the mirror behind the bench, standing tall, unafraid, the man he once discarded. I'm not the man who will forgive that easily, Harvey, I said. Love isn't a game, and it isn't something you beg for after you walk away. You had your chance. You chose to leave. His eyes welled, frustration and longing mingling in a way that made my heart tighten, but it didn't soften it. Not yet. I've built a life that doesn't need you, I continued, voice rising slightly with the fire that had carried me through the darkest months. And if you want in, you need to understand that this isn't about you anymore. It's about me, my life, my choices, my happiness. If you can't accept that, then you need to leave. He nodded, swallowing hard. I can. I will. I just need a chance to prove it. I looked at him, studying the man I had once loved, the man who had once walked away so casually. And for the first time, I considered it, not because I needed him, but because I wanted to see if he could meet me where I was now. The next months were a slow, cautious dance. Harvey tried, clumsily at first, to understand who I had become. He followed my routines, tried to engage with my work, and showed up to the events I cared about. But I was careful. Every gesture, every word, was measured. He had to prove that his intentions were real, not just a fleeting desire for control or recognition. One night, we attended a charity gala together. This time, we arrived side by side, not married, not as a trophy couple, but as two men learning how to meet each other as equals. The room was dazzling, a sea of chandeliers, flowing gowns, and soft laughter. But unlike before, we weren't performing for anyone else. Harvey leaned slightly, whispering, "You look incredible." I smiled, letting a flicker of warmth reach him. "And you're finally learning how to be human, Harvey." He chuckled, but there was sincerity in it now. And for the first time, I felt the possibility of something real. Something that wasn't about advantage or image or power, but about connection, mutual respect, and love that could survive the hardest trials. The process wasn't easy. There were arguments, moments of doubt, and nights when I questioned whether he was truly capable of change. But every time, I reminded myself of my worth, my journey, and the life I had fought so hard to reclaim. Harvey wasn't the center of my universe anymore. I was. And if he wanted to be part of it, he would have to prove he could meet me as an equal. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, he did. He listened. He apologized without excuses. He celebrated my successes without envy. And I realized that the man he had once been, entitled, selfish, unaware of anyone but himself, was gone, replaced by someone who might actually be capable of being a partner. One quiet evening, after months of this delicate rebuilding, we found ourselves alone on the rooftop of my apartment building. The city lights stretched below us like a tapestry of hope and possibility. "I've never stopped thinking about you," he admitted softly, eyes tracing mine. Even when I walked away, I knew I'd lost something invaluable. I leaned back against the railing, letting the wind play through my hair. "I didn't stop thinking about myself," I said, "and I didn't stop building my life. I had to, because you walking away taught me who I could become without waiting for someone else to decide my worth." He nodded slowly, and for the first time, he truly seemed to understand. "I don't want to ruin it this time," he said. "I want to meet you where you are. I want to earn the right to be with you." I studied him for a long moment, my heart cautious but daring to hope. "Then show me, Harvey, not just with words, not just with regret, with action, with consistency, with honesty. Then maybe we can see if this second chance can actually become something real." He smiled, tentative but determined, and I felt something shift, a delicate, fragile possibility that the story of US wasn't finished yet. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to imagine a future where we were together, not because I needed him, not because I was incomplete, but because I had become whole. And maybe, just maybe, he could stand beside me in that wholeness. Finally, as an equal, finally as someone who truly deserved the love I had fought so hard to reclaim. The days that followed were an exercise in cautious optimism. Harvey wasn't perfect. He stumbled, misread cues, sometimes slipped into old patterns of entitlement, but he was trying. And that was enough for now. For the first time, I felt in control of my own heart, letting someone back and only on my terms. We started small. Coffee in the mornings before I trained clients. Lunches where we spoke about the world instead of ourselves, about causes we believed in instead of images we had to maintain. He asked questions, really asked them, not just to perform politeness. And I answered, not just because I wanted to, but because I could. One rainy afternoon, I was walking through the streets of the city, umbrella in hand, Harvey beside me. The rain fell in sheets, drenching the pavement, blurring neon lights into streaks of color. I realized I had missed this, the quiet intimacy of just being with someone without pretension, without agenda. "I'm scared," he admitted suddenly, voice low. "Scared I'll mess this up. Scared you'll see I'm not enough." I stopped and looked at him, rain dripping down his hair, eyes wide and vulnerable. I placed a hand on his arm, grounding both of us. "You don't get to fear anymore," I said softly, "because this isn't about you being enough. It's about me choosing who I let in. And right now, I'm choosing to let you try. But don't forget, it's my life. Always has been, always will be. If you want to be part of it, you have to meet me there." He nodded, understanding in his expression. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Love was not about possession, not about control. Love was about choice. And I had learned to choose myself first. A few months later, we were at a private charity event, celebrating a milestone for the organization supporting LGBTQ youth. I had been invited to speak, Harvey there to support me, and the room was buzzing with energy, with hope, with the joy of people who had fought for visibility and acceptance. As I walked to the stage, I felt Harvey's hand brush against mine. It was tentative, a question, and I squeezed his fingers gently in response. Not a surrender, not an apology, just acknowledgement that he was there and that I had allowed him. The speech went well. I spoke of resilience, of self-discovery, of rebuilding after heartbreak. I spoke of finding strength when the world seemed to conspire against you. And for once, my words were mine, untouched by anyone else's agenda, and the applause that followed felt earned, personal, and freeing. Afterwards, Harvey pulled me aside. "You're incredible," he said, voice quiet so only I could hear. "Every single thing you've done, it's breathtaking." I held up a hand. "Stop. Don't say it yet. Show it. Actions speak louder than apologies. You want me in your life? You prove it, day by day. No shortcuts." He smiled, and this time it wasn't desperate. It was determined. And that determination, matched with patience and humility, was the first real thing we had shared in years. Weeks turned into months. Our lives began to intertwine carefully, deliberately. Harvey learned to navigate my world, respecting boundaries, celebrating victories, acknowledging my independence. I learned to trust again, not blindly, but with cautious hope. One evening, we were walking through the park where we had first met socially, before the deal, before the wedding, before everything fell apart. The city skyline glittered beyond the trees, lights reflecting on the calm water of the lake nearby. The air smelled of rain and earth, fresh and alive. "I remember this place," he said softly. "Before everything, before we became what we were. I remember thinking, maybe we could have been happy, and I ruined it." I stopped, facing him, letting the silence stretch. Then I said, "You didn't ruin me. I rebuilt myself. You just gave me the fire to prove I could survive without you. That's on you to understand." He swallowed hard. "And now, can we?" I studied him carefully, the same way I had studied my own reflection months ago. And then I reached out, cupping his face gently in my hands. "Now maybe, but only if you walk with me. Not behind me, not in front of me, beside me, equal. No shortcuts." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I can do that. I will do that. Every day." For the first time in years, I believed him. Not because I was naive, not because I forgot the past, but because he was showing me, slowly, consistently, that he could be someone worthy of the life I had built, and maybe even of my love. The next turning point came unexpectedly. My father's health worsened, and I had to travel home to the farm for several weeks. Harvey insisted on coming with me. The thought initially made me hesitate. Old habits die hard. But eventually, I agreed. Not because I needed him, but because I wanted him to see the life I had fought to protect, to understand the reality beyond the city lights, beyond ambition and appearances. The farm was quiet. The air smelled of hay and soil, of morning dew and sunlight. My father, though frail, smiled at Harvey, something that could not be staged. Harvey helped, lifting hay bales, fixing fences, doing small tasks that I once carried alone. And each action, humble and genuine, chipped away at the skepticism I had carried for so long. One evening, after a long day, We sat by the lake behind the farmhouse. My father had gone to bed early, trusting us to our quiet moment. Harvey turned to me, hesitant, vulnerable. "Nash, I can't promise I'll never fail," he said quietly. "But I can promise I'll always try. I see you now, not just the man the world saw, but the man who built this, who became more than anyone thought possible. And I want to be part of it, if you'll let me." I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel the old resentment, only clarity. "I can let you in," I said. "But remember, this isn't just about love. It's about respect. It's about honor. And if you ever betray that, the man you once knew won't forgive you a second time." He nodded solemnly, understanding fully. And for the first time, I allowed myself to hope, not because I needed him, but because he had earned the right to walk beside me. By the time we returned to the city, our relationship had transformed. It was no longer about power, advantage, or superficial appearances. It was about two men meeting as equals, learning to love deliberately, and choosing each other each day, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. One night, months after our reunion, we stood on the rooftop again, looking over the city lights. Harvey took my hand. No hesitation, no fear. "Nash, I know I don't deserve to ask this," he said, voice trembling slightly. "But would you consider being with me? Truly, honestly, as a partner in every sense." I looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity, the effort, the growth. I saw the man who had once walked away, and I saw the man who had returned, changed, humbled, and willing to meet me where I stood. "Yes," I whispered, squeezing his hand. "Not because I need you, not because I'm incomplete, but because I choose you, every day, as a man who respects who I am, as my equal, and as someone willing to love deliberately." He smiled, relief and awe in his expression, and leaned in, pressing a gentle, unhurried kiss to my lips. And in that moment, I felt the culmination of everything: pain, growth, loss, triumph, all flowing into a future where I was no longer the man abandoned, but the man who had risen, whole, proud, and in control of his own love. For Harvey, it was a lesson learned too late. For me, it was a victory earned. A love once lost had returned, not as a reward for submission, but as a choice made from strength, clarity, and self-respect. We walked back inside together, hand in hand, not as two men bound by convenience or social expectation, but as equals. Two men who had fought through betrayal, abandonment, and the crucible of ambition, and had emerged not broken, but unshakably whole. And that night, for the first time, I knew the truth. Sometimes the love you deserve doesn't come to you until you become the person who no longer needs it, but still can choose it, freely, with your whole heart. Harvey had begged for my love, but it wasn't my love he sought. It was the life I had built. And in the end, he didn't get it because of my weakness. He got it because of my strength. And I finally felt the sweetness of triumph, not over him, but over every fear, every abandonment, every shadow of doubt that had ever threatened to define me. We were together, but not because he had walked away and returned. We were together because I had risen, and he had learned to meet me there. And for the first time, it felt like forever.